Hello and welcome to another episode of Between Two Psychs with myself, Mike and Adam. And today we are going to be talking about the importance of bonding and attunement. So what is it, how to do it, and why it's important? Adam, any thoughts?
First thing that comes to mind is when you think about bonding and attunement, the first theory that pops out to me is attachment theory. I often think of teachers as the third adult or the third parent because they spend so much time with students that they may as well be the third attachment figure for kids.
True. Yeah, I mean, the amount of time that children spend in classrooms, absolutely spot on. It's so important to be getting that relationship now. And so many schools I see are great at the, approaches such as the relational approach. And, are getting the importance of having relationships and why those relationships are important for child development, but also to access the curriculum.
And I think it's only going to get more important as well because we're moving into a phase of education that we know funding isn't going to radically change in the next few years unless some sort of white paper comes out that we weren't expecting. And that kind of leaves practice. We got to think about how we do the job. And fundamental to the job is how you relate to each other. You can't just put more adults into the room. We need to think about the relationships we have across the entirety of the classroom. Last week or the week before, we spoke about exclusions and we found that there was a clinch point in Key Stage 3. So this relationship thing is just something that's going to be fundamental to education in the next 10 years.
100%, Adam. Thinking about we were going to do this episode, I came across something. I don't know who wrote this, but I wrote it down myself. The quote was, "Children borrow our nervous system before they borrow our words."
Beautiful. And
true. Yeah, so what does it mean, though? So, because I think it's, as Ed Psychs, it's important that we make sure that everybody that's following us does understand the nervous system and how it, what its role is in the body and how it affects learning. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the nervous system is primary. For those who are interested in following up on the theory behind it, a very good theory to jump into is the polyvagal theory. And that boils down to two competing systems. You have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic systems. And that's the nervous system throughout your entire body. The sympathetic nervous system's role is to amp everything up, make you more active, make you more aware. You're responding to things in the environment. So if you think about that, you go outside to play, you want your sympathetic nervous system to be working. However, when you're learning, you want your parasympathetic system to be working because that's what calms everything down. And you need that one to be on board and doing most of the work. For many people, they'll be thinking about, but what about the limbic system and what about the amygdala? These systems all talk to each other. There's different structures within the brain, and higher up you go, the more of a thinking part of the brain it is. So when we talk about the brain stem, we're talking about automatic reactions, things that you don't think about, they just happen, like your heartbeat being controlled. And then you move into the more emotional brain, and then you move into the thinking brain. And for children, we want them in their thinking brains, but they spend a lot of time in their emotional brain. And a part of that is because there's a couple of key structures that between the neocortex, which is the very top part of your brain, and the limbic system. And two that I think the listeners should be aware of is the cingulate and the insula. These are two structures that talk to each other, and you got to think of them as like sensories, as in they keep an eye on things that are going around the environment. And if they notice something's going on or something's not right, they'll tell which system to activate, whether that's everything's calm, just carry on as you are and continue learning, or something's quite threatening, let's wake up the amygdala and get cracking. And that's where the parasympathetic system is important. we've got to stay calm with the kids, because we talk a lot about modeling the children about behaviors, but by being calm with them, we are actually regulating their systems. And you mentioned last week about co-regulation. Do you want to go into that a bit more? Because that's vital in this whole analogy.
It certainly is. Yeah, I was just thinking about, based on what you were saying there, Adam, I think actually you should go from doctor to professor, by the way. That was a very quick whistle-stop tour of neuropsychology.
I won't be doing it again. Not in this episode, anyway.
But yeah, so co-regulation, it leads me into thinking about, well, that's the sort of the neurobiology that Adam's talking about. How do we do it? How do we get people to have a settled emotional side of their brain so that they can engage with the higher level thinking and therefore engage with the curriculum? And co-regulation is part of that and fits in with quite a few approaches that have been, and that's where, essentially adults validate and name feelings for young people, and they help children to regulate and problem solve through the situation. And this is an example of co-regulation. Other examples of co-regulation can come as part of something like PACE, Dan Hughes research. So playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy, where we're trying to support children to become familiar with what it is they're feeling, become familiar with what it's called, and then become familiar, this is the key part of co-regulation, become familiar with how to regulate. So co-regulation drops and moves into regulation. And that's where we want children to be empowered in order to be able to, engage with the curriculum. So we're talking about bonding and attunement. So how do we bond and how do we attune?
I want to start with attunement, because you named something very important there around emotional coaching. But within that, you said about naming feelings.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important for teachers and parents listening to this. Why is it important that you have language around emotions? Do you want me to go into it, or are you happy to?
No, I thought you were going to answer your own question there, Adam.
I think people are fed up of listening to me, Jerome.
So, are you going to answer that question, or are you going to leave it to me?
That's over to you.
Ask me the question again.
Why is naming feelings important?
Well, it's important because it helps children to start to experience and turn it into a concrete experience, but then start to validate, and through validation start to become trust and attunement. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I like that validation part.
Yeah.
So by validating what they're feeling, it's almost like it's real. And if something's real, you can make an internal template for it. So when I feel this, the name of this emotion is nervousness. Yeah. Okay, that's the beginning of the template. What do you do next with the template? This is the adult helping the child to build their internal working model. So the template moves from, okay, this is a feeling. Okay, this feeling has a name. When I have this feeling, I know the name. I take that name to an adult. That adult then helps me do a strategy. And that strategy might be sensory regulation. It might be talk through it.
Yeah, you're right there, Adam. And you're starting to move into, when we talk about attunement, it's not just tuning into how someone might be feeling, but it might be tuning into the message that's being used by the child through their behaviour. We often, as ed psychs, are involved in consultations around children and behaviour. And one of the questions we always ask, in one way or the other, is what message is the child giving through their behaviour? It's easy enough for us to ask that question because we're not in it all the time, facing it minute after minute, hour after hour. And we give people an opportunity to take the space and to tune in with reflection to try and understand the messages that are coming from a child. And that's so important, because once you understand the message, you can then start to validate and then start to build up that trusting bond that we're started to talk about.
Yeah. What do you think about bonding versus attunement? So attunement, it feels like, is the ability to interact with that child so they can begin to develop their internal world. Whereas bonding is more about the relationship and how they see the adult. And for me, a lot of my casework, I focus a lot on the relationship with the teacher. So if you think about the relationships that we often see with children who struggle emotionally, it's usually with a teaching assistant or a pastoral worker, or someone whose job isn't to deliver the curriculum. They're there as support. But in order to access that whole learning community, you have to have a relationship with that teacher, don't you? Because otherwise, you're never really going to build that trust to sit in that room and learn with others.
Yep, that's right, Adam. It's a really good question. What's the difference between attunement and bonding? And you answered it yourself. But the attunement is often associated with periods of challenge from a young person, where we're trying to understand what's going on and hopefully why it's going on. The bonding is almost like that's what we want to be doing from the first minute onwards, and the attunement comes on the back of the bonding. So bonding is about developing those relationships and about making sure that people, as in young people, trusting the adult and being able to draw guidance from them as well as absorb information from them. So bonding wise, what sort of things what sort of strategies might you be using yourself or sharing with other adults to foster a bond?
I go back to, we in this podcast, we seem to come back to identity a lot. And one of the things around shared identity is shared experience.
Yeah.
And I think it's similar. Well, it is similar to bonding because, when you bond with other people, you do share an identity with them. You identify with that person. For those teachers, I really get into the nitty gritty of about where is there a gap in your curriculum or in your day that you can spend time with a child and not be overwhelmed yourself. And that sounds simple. It's a simple goal, but it's actually not that easy to achieve when you've got to look after 30 kids. And quite often it can take up to 30 minutes to an hour to find a provision that works for everybody. I just come from one during the week whereby they do like a shared assembly once a week or a couple of times a week, but one of those sessions a week, the teacher is able to take the child out and just play games with them. Low demand, low cognitive load, just about play, fun. And then that child is now hopefully going to start building that bond with the adult. They'll see them as someone who has a softer side to them, someone who is capable of sitting with them whenever things don't go well, such as not winning in a board game. And that shared experience, that becomes a special time for that child. We do the same for parents, don't we? We often encourage parents to have dedicated time with their child, even if they've got a busy life or anything. And speaking from my own experience, recently my son has just become old enough to sit and listen to me read to him. And that's like the best half an hour of my day, is just sitting there in a room with him on my lap, reading Velveteen Rabbit and asking him not to turn the page before I finish it. He doesn't listen to that part.
I think you're talking there, Adam, it's a nice example, but you're talking about connection.
Okay, go on.
And the buzz phrase that's going around schools at the moment is connection.
Not connection. I heard collection. Go on, connection.
So connection, not correction. The other phrase is connection is the intervention. And, I would be inclined to be saying to people, if I was asked, how do you connect? Well, this is where we draw on our own selves. We just rely ourselves and who we are and be genuine, so that when young people are new to us, in the school, and we're a member of staff helping them, they get a sense of the genuine person coming through. And that's so important with connection. But I'm also not naive enough to think that we all possess social skills. So, there are strategies that we can use. And one of the strategies that I've often found supports the bond is the matching, mirroring and pacing approach. So the match, this is all sort of from behavioral psychology. So the matching is literally when you are in rapport, or you want rapport with a person, you start to match what they're talking about, or you match their pace of voice. You even maybe match their body language. And you can test this, because when you are in good rapport with somebody, like you might be with a loved one or a good friend, and you're having a good conversation, just have a look down and see your bodies are doing. And quite often you will find that they are also in rapport. For example, your feet might be pointing in similar directions, or your knees are pointing in the same, those sorts of subtle aspects of body language that we're not actually consciously processing, but they happen because of the subconscious processing. So,
sorry, I want you to finish that. Where do you sit when somebody has the arms crossed? Because I was trying to sell some services the other day, and I noticed that they had their arms crossed.
I think there's a message for you there, Adam.
I think there is. Oh, I know there was.
But what you could do is match, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And what that might make you do is start to maybe feel a sense of detachment. Okay, so what's going on here? And then we start moving into more the psychodynamic aspects of psychology. Transference, that is often used in therapeutic relationships, where the therapist will match the person coming for therapy in order to be able to start picking up on the subtleties of emotions. And those emotions are those being conveyed by the therapist. So if we swap that back to the classroom and you start to match distant behaviour, you may start to feel things. You're thinking, where's this feeling coming from?
Sorry, my
psychodynamic theories would say that's coming from the child.
I'd say transference and not define it in a psychology podcast.
Okay, so transference is what I'm talking about, is when things are getting projected from the child onto you. And countertransference is when you start to adopt that as a real thing and you return something. So, for example, a child, you might pick up from a child that they distinctly dislike you. That's the transference. The countertransference is that you also don't like them. You start sending this negative dynamic backwards and forwards.
And I remember when I first started training, I was sent into a secondary school, and the head of one of the assistant heads said, so we got a child here who isn't doing what a member of senior leadership is telling them. And I said something to the effect of, do you think this child doesn't like you? And he said, yes. And then he said, but he also does that. I also don't like him. And that's leading into your transference, counter-transference thing, isn't it?
Yep. And the other part of transference, counter-transference, is the deeper level where you might be representative of something in that child's past.
Get out a lot with trauma, don't you?
Yeah, we do, yeah. So old Adam is in the school and someone dislikes him, but they don't dislike him because he's Adam. They dislike him because he represents somebody or something from the past.
There was once a case I couldn't work with a child because they'd been abused by their father, who was bald.
Yeah. Right.
And I couldn't go in and work with the child because he couldn't cope with it. Same thing with bald men. I couldn't grow my hair quick enough.
But that's absolutely, when we're talking about bonding and, how can we do it? we can go back to the behavioural psychology, which I was talking about, which is matching and also pacing. So if somebody's excited, so you've got a child that's very heightened, there's an element if you've got to catch them and then pace them down to a slower pace.
And by pace, you mean, you don't mean Dan Siegel's, you mean this behaviorals.
Just literally as in the speed at which you are talking. I'm talking about that pace rather than an acronym. Yeah. So if you've got a child that's super heightened and you're saying, calm down, there's such a huge difference between their pace and your pace. That child can't match you, can't catch you. So you have to match them.
So you would start quickly and then slow it down gradually.
Yeah. That's
I suppose going back to the original thing of what was it you said about your calms their nervous system? Mm-hmm. That's linking into that as well. We're going back to the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
You're starting off in your sympathetic form where you're matching the pace of their nervous system by being very animated and you're consciously slowing it down.
Yeah, absolutely. But the psychodynamic side of relationships is very interesting to be aware of, and if people are interested in that, I would certainly be looking at therapists such as Carl Rogers, who was very much into helping people to develop a rapport in therapy as quickly as they could, but genuinely. And so he would be, teaching people about being aware of the dynamics that you are feeling when you're sitting in the company of somebody, and also being able to tell yourself, is that my stuff, or is this something that's just newly appeared to me? And there's a strong chance, if it's just newly appeared to you, that it's being projected onto you.
So when you say projection, that's somebody putting something out there and you receiving it.
Yeah.
And I suppose sticking with Carl Rogers, he talks a lot about the therapeutic relationship, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
And we're in the days of AI where AI can substitute for a lot, but what it cannot do is substitute for the relationship, can it? It can make a good effort of doing things like basic CBT where it talks you through a problem, but there is something about sitting in a room with someone who you trust to hold difficult emotions.
Yeah.
And that goes back, although it's not a therapeutic relationship, the teacher has a similar relationship with 30-odd kids, because each of those kids is an emotionally developing child, and at one stage they're going to become an adult, and the person that they spend quite a lot of time with is the teacher, and they have to hold those difficult emotions of those children, don't they? And it has such a profound effect. Everybody can remember a teacher that treated them well, 30, 40 years on from leaving school.
They really can. And it's the value of that relationship, what that relationship meant to you at the time. I was at school a long time ago, but I can still remember a few teachers for that. Yep.
Yeah. Any of them still with us?
I don't think so. We talked a couple of podcasts ago about the sort of conversational strategies that can support with relationship building that I think would be worth just flagging up again here for bonding and attuning. And the one that came to mind for me yet again was motivational interviewing. If you'd ever do the training on motivational interviewing, the trainers will say it's not really about an interview, it's about dialogue, it's about how to converse and how to open up thinking. And one of the key sorts of frameworks that's drawn upon in motivational interviewing is OARS, OARS. So O would be standing for the open questions. The A is for the affirmation. The R is reflective listening, or just supporting reflections. And then the S is the summaries or the summarizing. So you're bringing it to a close, and those types of frameworks they can last 30 seconds or they can last 30 minutes depending on the situation that an adult is in with the child. And personally speaking, whenever I've done oars, or whenever oars has been done to me, like in training, the affirmation is incredible. Because you're affirming the young person. And for many people, being affirmed when they're in the middle of a challenge is a first.
So give us an example of that.
Well, affirming. So, you could say maybe that I appreciate that you're willing to meet me at the moment. Or I can see clearly that you're a very resourceful person and you're drawing upon those strengths at the moment. There's different ways of affirming.
The reason I asked that was because about years ago when I was doing my research on multi-professional working, one of the things that came out of it was the best results come when the professionals can validate their perspective or experience of others within the room.
Okay. Yeah.
And it led to where that behavior was noted, the outcomes tended to be stronger. They tended to be more child-centered. They took into account of the resources available, the skill set available. Where that behavior was absent, you got more bog standard type things of onward referrals. The problem still exists. There's no sort of clear strategy. And it's just interesting to see that within the motivational interview framework as well. There's something about, as human beings, when we see our identity or our perspective reflected in someone else, that promotes a bonding experience, because it's almost like I see you and I'm not rejecting you.
Yeah.
Even if I disagree with you.
Yeah.
And many teachers will disagree with students on their behavior.
Yeah.
But just by that affirming part, and then I suppose with the motivational interview framework, you can open up those opening questions, like you said.
Absolutely. And you know what, Adam, I know we're kind of drawing to the thin end of this podcast, but it goes back to what you said at the very beginning, when you're working through the stages of the brain to try and help young people to get into the learning zone of the brain and out of the emotional zone. We've been considering different strategies, different approaches, different theories. The two that stand out for me is the sort of the transference and understanding, the messages that can be coming backwards and forwards, and also the emotional interviewing, which can, quite easily and quite quickly move people from the emotion into the learning. Is there anything that stands out for you today?
It's that sort of attunement, the validating part, and where you start off where their nervous system is, and you move them to that parasympathetic nervous system. That seems to be the core for me, the core of today's message. And I think it is going to become core of teaching practice as we move forward. Teachers that I spend a lot of time talking to, they often reflect on their training journey with me, and this relational stuff isn't taught to them. But it has to come first. It comes before curriculum delivery, in my view.
Well, that's your view, Adam. I don't
affirm it.
I totally don't disagree. And there's some things about coming into professions where you're dealing with people and assumptions are made that we ourselves already can deal with people. So we're just going to learn how to teach, or we're going to learn how to be psychologists. You're absolutely right. I don't remember being taught how to attune and to bond with kids when I did my teacher training.
Nor had to go and find it off your own back.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Or it's just assumed that you already do it. So it's always good, I think, to be thinking about what we do already and how can it be improved.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that today's podcast maybe contributes to some reflection, and certainly we'd be open to questions, wouldn't we? You like to do the closing part, Adam?
Yeah. If you've got any questions, please send them in to us, either through our websites or you can contact us on LinkedIn. My website is www.dradammccartney.com. Mike, what's your website?
And mine is ridgewaypsychology.co.uk.
And you can find us on LinkedIn just by typing our names. Please tune in again next week. We will be looking at restorative practice, which is one that I find very interesting, and I'm hoping that it'll help teachers move forward as well.
Thanks, Adam. Good to talk.
All the best, Mike. See you next.
Bye-bye.